Yumina heard the voice and trembled. For years, she had not encountered another soul in this forest aside from her mother. And she had no desire to be discovered. She concealed herself behind the trees. "Please show yourself if you are human." With a tremor in her voice, she responded, "It's probably for the best if you don't look my way, as I appear quite unappealing and frightening. I am a person, yet I appear distinct." The prince chuckled. "I don't appear any better either. Honestly, I doubt you could possibly look worse than I do." In a time long past, nestled among the rolling hills of eastern Ghana, there existed a magnificent and prosperous realm known as the Oban Kingdom. This realm was brimming with joyful souls, vibrant blooms, and towering trees that murmured softly in the breeze. In this enchanting realm resided a woman named Nkikina. Nkikina was renowned by all for her breathtaking beauty and her generous, compassionate spirit. Her smile had the power to illuminate even the bleakest of nights, and her hands were perpetually poised to offer assistance. The villagers held her in their hearts and shared only the most beautiful words about her. Nkikina was always ready to lend a hand to anyone in need. If someone felt hunger, she would gladly offer her food, even when her own supplies were limited. She exhibited remarkable generosity and consistently sought to bring joy to those around her. When the time was right for marriage, Nkikina wed Nkakani, renowned in the village for his flute playing. The beauty of his music inspired joy and movement in everyone who heard it. The entire village buzzed with excitement when Nkikina and Nkakani tied the knot. They rejoiced with melodies, lively movements, and an abundance of tasty dishes and presents. All expressed their hopes for a life brimming with joy and prosperity. The villagers cherished Nkikina deeply and wished for her happiness each and every day. A few months after Nkikina and Nkakani tied the knot, a wonderful event unfolded in their lives. Nkikina discovered she was expecting a baby. This news filled her and her husband, Nkakani, with immense happiness. They were absolutely thrilled with joy. The whole village rejoiced in their happiness and joined in the festivities. There was a palpable excitement in the air as everyone eagerly anticipated the arrival of the new baby. The villagers held Nkikina in deep affection and were eager to express the depth of their care for her. They surrounded her with affection, presents, and various forms of support, as she had consistently demonstrated kindness and generosity to all. As Nkikina's child developed within her, her body began to transform. She started experiencing peculiar cravings for food. Whenever the aroma of delectable dishes wafted through the air, her mouth would water uncontrollably, igniting an irresistible craving to indulge. At times, the hunger pangs became so intense that she would grab her plate and venture next door to request some food from the neighbor who was busy cooking. A number of the village women were pleased to offer their food to Nkikina. They recognized her goodness and acknowledged that her desires stemmed from her pregnancy. They always viewed her not as a beggar, but as a companion in distress. However, not all shared that sentiment. In the village, hushed voices spoke of her when she wasn't around. They questioned her constant requests for food. They would chuckle and make hurtful remarks, asking if she was the first woman ever to be pregnant or if she believed she was bearing the Messiah. Yet, the whispers and mockeries failed to deter Nkikina. She persisted in pleading for food as her cravings intensified. Unable to resist the urge, on a sweltering afternoon, she found solace beneath the expansive branches of a grand tree in front of her humble hut. In an instant, the enticing scent of fresh fish and salad soup wafted through the air. Drawing her attention to the nearby cooking, her mouth began to water, and despite her best efforts to resist the craving, she found herself unable to do so. She lifted her plate and approached to request some food, just as she routinely did. This moment felt distinct. The woman preparing the soup was among those who held a dislike for Nkikina. When Nkikina requested some soup, the woman responded with a sharp tone. "Nkikina, the whole village isn't responsible for your pregnancy," she remarked harshly. "What compels you to behave in such a foolish manner? People often speak highly of Nkikina, describing her as a good woman. Nkikina is an admirable woman. Yet here you stand today. Leave now. I cannot provide you with food." Nkikina experienced a shiver coursing through her body. She had never encountered words like those before. She experienced a flush of embarrassment and warmth. She pondered what actions might have provoked such fury in the woman. Silently, she pivoted and made her way back to her dwelling. She settled beneath the tree, tears streaming down her face. The cutting remarks had pierced her heart profoundly. Yet, above all, she had an undeniable craving for that exquisite fish soup. Nkikina sat beneath the tree, her thoughts swirling as she contemplated her next move. She yearned for the insala soup intensely and needed to discover a means to quell this insatiable hunger. Then, out of nowhere, a thought struck her mind. In the village, a river flowed by the name of the River. The villagers held a deep affection for this river. A shrine dedicated to the river goddess, Umri, stood gracefully along its banks. The villagers held a deep conviction that the river possessed the power to resolve numerous issues and bestow blessings upon those who offered their prayers by its banks. The river was particularly remarkable, teeming with a variety of fish species. However, a rigid regulation existed within the village. Fishing and consuming any fish from the river was strictly prohibited. It was rumored that those who consumed the fish would face a grim fate. Stoned to death by the villagers by the river, lest the entire village suffer the consequences. Ancient tales spoke of individuals who consumed the fish and met their demise by stoning. Yet, Inkikina reflected, that was an eternity ago. Those stories were passed down to her from her great-grandfather and grandfather, though she had not experienced them firsthand. Sometimes, these elderly gentlemen have a tendency to embellish their stories. She craved the fish soup intensely, and the fish from the River appeared to be the most convenient choice at this moment. She was consumed by an overwhelming desire for the fish, feeling as though her very existence depended on it. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow, yet the river remained nearly deserted, with only a few souls lingering by its banks. With unwavering resolve, Inkikina made her way to the River. Wishing to remain unseen by anyone, she feigned a simple journey to the river, claiming it was to offer her prayers to the gods. Upon reaching the river, she felt a wave of surprise and relief wash over her as she noticed its serene stillness. Typically, the scene was filled with villagers engaged in prayer or children joyfully playing and swimming. But today, it lay desolate. Mother Loch surely smiled down upon her. She retrieved her water pot and effortlessly caught a multitude of fish. As the river teemed with them, Inkikina rushed home with the fish in hand. She tidied them up and got ready her unsala soup. The aroma of the soup enveloped her home, and anticipation bubbled within her as she looked forward to savoring it. As she settled into her meal, a wave of happiness and satisfaction washed over her. However, her happiness was fleeting. Out of nowhere, she was startled by the sound of loud voices echoing from outside her home. A band of furious men burst into her compound, yelling, "Inkikina, Inkikina, where are you?" Her heart raced with sudden excitement. Had anyone spotted her by the river? She felt certain that no one was present when she reeled in the fish. Unbeknownst to Inkikina, a child lurked nearby, concealed among the bushes, attending to nature's call. The young one witnessed Inkikina reel in the fish and hurried back to share the news with his father. His father, filled with disbelief and fury, approached the village elders, and now they had arrived for Inkikina. The furious men encircled her residence. The act of killing fish from the river was a grave offense, and they had come to escort her to the shrine to confront the repercussions of her deed. Inkikina sensed her heart racing within her chest. She felt lost, unsure of her next words or actions. She simply desired fish to quell her cravings. Yet now she found herself in serious trouble. The furious men gathered outside Inkikina's hut, their voices rising in a powerful chorus of anger and defiance. Their fury enveloped the atmosphere, casting a shadow over everything. Inkikina understood that she had to leave the confines of her hut. Immediately, the men seized her and whisked her away. They kept singing and chanting while leading her toward the shrine. The commotion captured the villagers' curiosity, prompting a crowd to gather and witness the unfolding events. Upon realizing it was Inkikina, tears flowed freely. There were those who despised Inkikina, murmuring among themselves that her insatiable desires had ultimately led her into deep trouble. Their disdain for Inkikina stemmed solely from the overwhelming affection she received from the rest of the village. The men devised a plan to lead Inkikina to the river, where they intended to end her life by stoning her. Inkikina's tears streamed down her cheeks as she pleaded for their mercy. Yet the men remained unheeding. Their anger overshadowed any concern for her desperate cries. At last, they arrived at the shrine. At the shrine, the chief priest compelled Inkikina to kneel by the river. He commanded the men to gather stones and carry out the sentence of stoning her to death, as it was the prescribed punishment for those who had transgressed. She has violated our territory, and she must face the consequences. Otherwise, she risks putting everyone in this village in jeopardy. We must avoid incurring the anger of the deities. Inkikina's heart raced with trepidation. She shut her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. At that moment, a command arrived from the monarch. The king, having learned of the unfolding events, dispatched a messenger bearing a command to spare Inkikina's life. Rather than facing death, she was to be exiled to the forsaken section of the village as retribution for her transgression. While the deities would be placated through offerings and purification rituals, it became evident that a few of the women who had encountered her previously had ventured to the palace to implore the king for compassion. The women recalled every kind gesture Inkikina had shown them and found it unbearable to witness her endure such a tormenting end. The king, filled with compassion, was touched by their heartfelt pleas, and recalling Inkikina's generosity, he chose to spare her life. The high priest of the shrine seethed with anger, yet he found himself compelled to comply with the king's decree. Ultimately, the king stood as the supreme power in the realm, second only to the divine. In a fit of rage, he unleashed a curse upon her unborn child. We will not endure the plight of a woman who has been spared from confronting the consequences of her wrongdoing. A curse has been unleashed upon this land, yet it is her unborn child who will inherit its weight. He bellowed with fury. Inkikina was granted a reprieve and was relocated to the desolate section of the village, distant from those she cherished. There, she would spend the remainder of her days as a pariah. The individuals felt a sense of sorrow, yet it remained a preferable fate compared to being executed by stoning. Ultimately, there remains a glimmer of hope for those who are alive. Inkikani felt a profound sense of disappointment wash over him upon learning of his wife's actions. She might have simply waited for me, he lamented. He turned away from her completely, insisting that she bore a divine curse, and he wished to shield himself and his family from any misfortune she might bring. Inkikani's rejection deepened Inkikina's sorrow, amplifying her sense of isolation and despair. Each day, she found herself seated before her modest hut, tears streaming down her face as she lamented the moment her desires unraveled the joyful existence she had painstakingly created. She was alone in the world, with only her brother by her side. Each day, she offered her prayers to the deities, seeking their compassion while also pleading for the well-being of her unborn child. "My little one is pure and untouched. Please, spare us," she would cry. In the forsaken section of the village where Inkikina resided, a handful of her friends occasionally ventured out to see her and offer their assistance in modest ways. Though such visits were infrequent, often, Inkikina found herself in solitude, confronting the hurdles of her new existence on her own. As her pregnancy advanced, the challenges she faced intensified. As her delivery date approached, she found herself alone, facing the pain and challenges of this momentous occasion without any support. Inkikina would frequently find herself sitting in silence, tears streaming down her face, engulfed by a profound sense of isolation and rejection from the world around her. She constantly reminded herself that she was the source of her own misfortune. One morning, Uju, Inkikina's friend, paid her a visit. As she gazed at Inkikina, she realized that Inkikina didn't seem to be doing well. "You look like you're about to give birth any moment now," Uju remarked, but Inkikina was too weak to muster a reply. Shortly after Uju arrived, Inkikina began to experience labor pains. She let out a cry of anguish. In a state of sheer panic, Uju dashed back to the village to summon the midwife. But by the time they could make their way back, Inkikina had already welcomed her newborn into the world. It was a baby girl, yet an unsettling feeling lingered in the air. The baby appeared quite unusual, evoking a sense of strangeness and fear. They gazed at the infant, disbelief etched across their faces. In the midst of their surprise, the midwife fulfilled her responsibilities, tending to both Inkikina and her newborn with care. Yet, she was unable to dismiss the peculiar sensation regarding the baby's looks. As night descended, whispers of Inkikina's unusual baby echoed through the village. Whispers and gossip swirled around the peculiar child. It was widely believed that the statue of the baby stemmed from a curse placed by the chief priest. The deities appeared to have exacted their retribution for the transgression she had wrought. Murmuring amongst one another, Inkikina felt a deep sense of sorrow. "Behold what I have brought upon my child," she wept. Under the cover of darkness, she would slip away, presenting various offerings to placate the deities of eerie. She implored for compassion for her little one, yet her infant stayed unchanged. Inkikina cradled her baby tightly, tears cascading down her cheeks. The infant appeared unique, yet to her, the child was invaluable and the nearest kin she possessed. She understood that she had caused this for the child, and she vowed to herself and her baby that she would love and nurture her, regardless of what others said or thought. Your constraints will never hinder you from becoming who you are meant to be. Throughout your life, you will inspire hope in others. She would often tell her child, "Let my mistakes rest on my shoulders, not yours." Even with her unwavering resolve, the whispers among the villagers continued unabated. Numerous visitors would arrive, feigning joy for the new arrival. Yet their true intention was merely to confirm the whispers circulating around. The onlookers gazed at the infant, their expressions a mix of wonder and scrutiny. Inkikina sensed the murmurs and traps around her, yet she made every effort to brush them aside. She devoted all her passion to nurturing and cherishing her child. Inkikina and her baby, Inmono, faced scorn and mockery from the villagers. A growing number of individuals started to view them as afflicted by a curse. Can you envision what she refers to a child as? A newborn. They would remark that it resembles a woman of 90 years. They reached the conclusion that the woman was undoubtedly malevolent. Once cherished by the whole village, the woman now faced solitude. She was completely isolated, with no one willing to engage with her. Whenever she was seen, judgment fell upon her, accompanied by harsh words. Yet, this never caused Inkikina to harbor any hatred towards her child. She tended to her with an intensity that was unmistakable. Inkikina chose the name Inmono for her child, signifying beauty. This elicited even more laughter as they perceived Inmono to be the antithesis of beauty. As Inmono matured, her mother consistently encouraged her to venture into the village to interact with the other children there. Her desire was for her daughter to experience happiness and a sense of belonging. Inmono felt the weight of the gazes upon her, as if she were an anomaly. Each step through the village drawing curious eyes that seemed to multiply in disbelief. I understand that the child desired to be her friend and engage more in play with her. They ridiculed and tormented her, labeling her as a malevolent presence. Every time they caught sight of her, they would cry out about wicked spirits pursuing her through the village square. They felt a strange delight as they observed her weep in the village square. You have to witness her. Her expression is quite amusing whenever tears stream down her cheeks. It was difficult to discern whether she was male or female. For these children, it was all about enjoyment. Inmono was a significant subject of discussion in the village. Occasionally, children would come by their house solely to taunt and hurl stones at Inmono during Inkikina's absence. The little girl endured a deeply distressing experience, feeling isolated and disheartened. One night, with tears cascading down her cheeks, Inmono cried out for her mother. "Mom, why do people treat me like this? What makes me appear so different?" Inkikina felt a profound sense of pain. She envisioned her daughter engaging with other children and experiencing a typical childhood. Yet she had erred. She ought to have realized that Inmono would never find acceptance. She appeared completely different from them. She appeared frail, aged, and exceedingly thin. As she absorbed her daughter's heartfelt words, she grasped her hands and gazed intently into her eyes. "You appear unique because you possess something extraordinary," Inkikina said softly. "Individuals often despise what they are afraid of, and your brilliance evokes that fear. They are afraid that you embody what they will never achieve. That's the reason for their disdain towards you. Rest assured, you have my support, and you are truly fortunate." Inmono wrapped her arms around her mother, a sense of relief washing over her as she absorbed those soothing words. From that moment forward, Inmono ceased to step outside the hut. She remained inside throughout the day to escape the ridicule of the villagers and the taunts of the children. However, this proved to be no solution, as they quickly discovered her whereabouts. One day, as Inkikina ventured to the market to sell her farm produce and procure some food for herself and Inmono, a group of mischievous children arrived to mock Inmono. It had been some time since they last laid eyes on her, and they had concealed themselves near Inkikina's house, intently watching for the moment she would step outside, eager to pay her a visit to mock and torment her for their amusement. Just as they often did. For them, this was merely a game, and she was the subject of their amusement. As the doorbell rang, Inmono, under the impression that it was her mother, eagerly swung the door open. The children then pulled her out and started to shove her around and strike her. As Inmono wept and begged them to cease, they only struck her more fiercely, their laughter echoing around her. This brought them joy. They struck her relentlessly until she collapsed to the ground, utterly weakened. Suddenly, they erupted into a rhythmic chant. "What is she? A mere framework, devoid of life," the others would respond. "What is she? A malevolent entity haunting a small village." They sang these crow songs relentlessly until they were completely worn out. Afterward, they departed from Inmono and hurried back to their home, feeling a sense of fulfillment for having dealt with the malevolent spirit that plagued their village. Upon Inkikina's return home, she discovered her daughter sprawled in front of the hut, nearly devoid of life. "Inmono," she exclaimed, hurrying over to her. She raised Inmono and wept. "Who has inflicted this upon you?" "My dear," she cried with deep sorrow. She hurried indoors to fetch some herbs and started to apply them to Inmono. For days, Inkikina remained in their hut with her daughter, tears streaming down her face as she fervently prayed to the gods to spare her life. Inmono was all she possessed. After a few days, the gods responded to her prayers, and Inmono started to improve. Inmono wept after she had completely healed. "I wish to leave this place behind. It feels like nobody appreciates me, and I stand out in a way that makes me uncomfortable. Please, take me away from here," she implored. Inkikina realized that action was imperative. She had exhausted every effort, yet it appeared that no miracle was on the horizon. She was overwhelmed with grief upon returning home to discover her daughter had passed away. She had to take Inmono far from the village, ensuring her safety above all else. She discovered an individual from a distant village to construct a quaint hut nestled deep within the forest. She was determined to keep her daughter's whereabouts a secret from everyone in the village. She found it unbearable to contemplate the possibility of losing Inmono. Regardless of her appearance, she remained her child. Inkikina often paid visits to her daughter, bringing along food and providing companionship whenever possible. She took great care to ensure that no one trailed behind her, determined to keep the hideout a secret and protect Inmono from any potential harm. In the solitude of the forest, Inmono experienced a profound sense of loneliness. In the absence of her mother, she would sit outside her hut, a look of deep sorrow etched on her face. One day, as she sat in front of her hut, her eyes wandering over the trees in the forest, a melody suddenly filled her heart, and she began to sing. She sang and sang, her joy radiating through every note. She discovered that singing brought her a sense of tranquility and serenity. In that instant, it seemed as though all her troubles vanished, and she experienced a profound sense of liberation. Inmono felt an immense sense of happiness from this discovery. Each day, she would twirl and sing amidst the trees, believing the woodland creatures were her captivated audience. The birds ceased their chirping and the leaves fell silent, as though captivated by her enchanting melodies. Inmono would sing until exhaustion overtook her. Then she would retreat to her hut and drift into slumber. As time passed, Inmono found herself embracing the joys of her life in the forest. In that place, she discovered liberation, far removed from the biting remarks and harsh deeds of the townsfolk. Within the embrace of the forest, she found the freedom to truly be herself. There was no one present to hurl stones or utter insults. She danced and sang with abandon, transforming the forest into her enchanting realm. As time went on, Inmono's song blossomed into something even more enchanting. She composed melodies about the blossoms and the creatures that inhabited her surroundings. She wove tales and vocalized them, envisioning herself immersed in the enchanting realm of the forest. She would swell and spin, her laughter resonating through the trees. The forest, previously a realm of dread and concealment, transformed into a sanctuary of joy and delight for Inmono. Inkikina, despite her concerns about her daughter's solitude, felt a sense of relief witnessing Inmono's joy. Each time she came by, she discovered Inmono beaming and at ease. Inmono would dash to her mother, joyfully recounting her day and the exciting new things she had uncovered. Inkikina listened, her heart brimming with affection, delighted that her daughter had discovered a path to happiness amidst it all. In that same kingdom, there resided a king of great wealth and kindness, known as King Dyke. King Dyke was not merely wealthy, he possessed a heart brimming with love and generosity. His subjects held him in profound affection and esteem, for he was undeniably a remarkable ruler. He consistently paid attention to their concerns and made every effort to assist each individual. During the reign of King Dyke, the kingdom thrived in prosperity. This signified that all things flourished and improved. The fields brimmed with thriving crops, the markets buzzed with the lively exchange of goods, and the rivers sparkled, teeming with fish. The villages in the kingdom underwent swift and noticeable expansion. Structures rose, educational institutions took shape, and the thoroughfares were kept in excellent condition. Not even the tiniest village in the kingdom was overlooked. King Dyke ensured that each and every village, regardless of its size, received the recognition it warranted and the assistance it required. King Dyke enjoyed journeying throughout his realm to observe the well-being of his subjects. He would glide through the streets in his magnificent chariots, greeting all he encountered with a wave. The villagers exchanged smiles and waves, filled with pride for their remarkable king. He paused to engage with the children, inquiring about their studies and aspirations. He would pay attention to the elders, honoring their insights and absorbing the lessons from their journeys. He was wed to a remarkably beautiful woman named Oji. The king and queen Oji shared a profound love, a bond that shone through in every action they took. Their reign over the kingdom was a harmonious partnership, with the king always seeking the counsel of his cherished queen before making any significant decisions. Their collaboration was robust, characterized by a deep sense of respect and unwavering support for one another. The monarchs were filled with joy upon the arrival of their firstborn, a son they chose to name Ralu. He was their first and only child. After Ralu's birth, Queen Oji faced numerous challenges and was unable to conceive once more. Yet, the king cherished his queen to such an extent that he turned down the idea of marrying another. Despite the tradition that allowed kings to have numerous wives, particularly when seeking additional heirs, his affection for Oji remained steadfast, and he cherished her more than anything else. Ralu was cherished beyond measure. They held him dear and devoted themselves to nurturing him well and safeguarding him. Ralu was nurtured in an environment filled with affection and support. With an inquisitive spirit and a courageous soul, he was perpetually on the lookout for fresh escapades. Since childhood, he found himself captivated by the realms that lay outside the palace walls. The monarchs were perpetually vigilant in their guardianship of him, for he was their sole offspring and the rightful successor to the crown. Yet, Prince Ralu frequently implored his parents for permission to venture out and discover the wonders of the kingdom. He cherished exploring the village, engaging with the locals, discovering their traditions, and riding through the woods. The king and queen, recognizing their son's adventurous nature, permitted him to venture forth, closely monitored by loyal guards. Among the serene landscapes, the tranquil forest held a special place in Prince Ralu's heart. He cherished the towering trees, the melodic birdsong, and the tranquil rivers. He experienced a profound bond with the natural world. The gentle murmur of the water and the soft whisper of the leaves enveloped him in a sense of tranquility and joy. He frequently found himself by the rivers, observing the fish glide through the water and absorbing the soft whispers of the forest. Prince Ralu had a deep affection for the mountains. Oh, how he cherished those mountains! He cherished the act of scaling them and perching at the summit, reveling in the splendor of his realm. From the mountain, he had a panoramic view of everything: the villages, the forests, and the rivers stretched out before him. He felt as if he had reached the pinnacle of existence. In the evenings, he would sit there in silence, absorbing the sunset and relishing the stunning panorama. The splendor of the realm unfolded before him, filling him with immense joy. Despite their concerns, the king and queen understood the depth of his passion for these adventures. Their hearts warmed at the sight of his happiness, and they couldn't resist smiling at the pure joy reflected in his eyes. Prince Ralu's passion for the natural world and his adventurous soul evoked memories of their own youthful days. Prince Ralu's passion for the great outdoors and thrilling escapades deepened his connection with his subjects and his realm. He grasped the intricacies of their lives and the essence of their needs, and they felt the profound care he held for them. He was more than a prince, he was a companion and a guardian to all in the realm. The monarchs beamed with pride at the accomplishments of their beloved heir. Their belief in his future greatness was unwavering, as they anticipated the day when he would ascend to the throne. Just like his father before him, the people of the kingdom eagerly awaited that moment, confident that with Prince Ralu as their future ruler, their realm would remain a bastion of joy, prosperity, and splendor. However, an unforeseen event occurred. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Prince Ralu found himself traversing the familiar paths of the forest, a routine he cherished. He was filled with a sense of adventure and chose to venture into an unfamiliar section of the forest. While he rode, something captured his attention. The Adara tree stood tall and grand, its branches heavy with ripe, golden fruits that glistened in the sunlight. Prince Ralu's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Adara held a special place in his heart, cherished above all else. Without hesitation, he leaped from his horse and dashed toward the tree. He reached for a ripe Adara fruit and savored a bite. The fruit dissolved on his tongue, sweet and smooth like honey. It was the most delightful, mouth-watering fruit he had ever experienced. He shut his eyes and relished the flavor, experiencing a deeper sense of happiness. He mused about how delightful it would be to savor those fruits each day. With a keen desire for more of the fruits, Prince Ralu gathered additional ones and carefully stowed them in his bag. He mounted his horse and rode back home, filled with a profound sense of happiness and contentment. He eagerly anticipated the moment to unwind and savor the remaining fruits he had gathered. Unable to fight the temptation, he hurriedly consumed the leftover fruits the moment he entered his room. Contentment washed over him as he gently succumbed to slumber. However, the following morning, everything transformed. The prince awoke with an unusual sensation. As he rose from his slumber, he sensed an unmistakable shift in the atmosphere around him. He approached the mirror and was struck with dread at his reflection. A piercing scream erupted from his mouth. Upon hearing the scream, his mother, the queen, hurried into his room. She almost let out a blood-curdling scream upon seeing him, gripped by fear at the sight of the figure looming in front of her. It resembled an ape, or perhaps something entirely unfamiliar to her. Yet, upon hearing its voice, she understood it was her son. "My son," she cried, drawing nearer to him. "What has transpired with you?" The prince, equally bewildered, started to weep. He spoke through his tears. "I just woke up this way." The queen felt an overwhelming sadness. "Wait here while I fetch your father. You cannot let anyone witness you in this state." She rushed to locate the king, her heart racing with trepidation. Upon seeing his son, the king was taken aback, his surprise palpable. "What might have transpired?" he inquired, perplexed. Their quest for answers became imperative, prompting the king to summon the chief priest with haste, instructing the messenger that the matter was of utmost urgency. The chief priest hurried to the palace with great urgency. He was ushered into the king's secluded quarters. Shielded from curious gazes, the monarch detailed the circumstances, prompting the high priest to commence his sacred rites without delay. He executed decantations and uttered the enigmatic tongue of the deities. The monarchs and their heir observed with bated breath, yearning for a resolution. After a prolonged silence, the chief priest finally shook his head and came to a halt. He gazed at them with wounded eyes. The prince disclosed that he has partaken of the fruits of the spirit within the sinister confines of the forest. The essence has woven an enchantment around him, a consequence for his actions. Unbeknownst to Prince Ralu, the Udara tree he had discovered was far from an ordinary tree. The tree held a revered status, its fruits celebrated as the essence of the spirit. These fruits were destined solely for the divine, and no human was ever meant to savor their essence. Consuming these fruits might spell significant trouble for anyone who isn't a spirit. The queen emitted a piercing cry. "I have completed my task. My son, what are our next steps?" The king inquired, his desperation for a solution palpable. The chief priest sighed and shook his head in disapproval. "I'm uncertain. The deities have chosen to remain silent henceforth. We should make an effort to soothe them. Their anger towards the prince is palpable." The news settled in their hearts like a weighty boulder. The monarchs were engulfed in sorrow and anxiety. They understood the urgency of the situation and realized they needed to move quickly to rescue their son. The queen embraced the prince gently, her tears cascading down his fearsome visage. The king, striving to maintain his composure, resolved to gather offerings and conduct rituals to soothe the spirits of the forest. As time flowed on, the palace resonated with the echoes of prayers and the cadence of rituals. The monarchs exhausted every possible effort to win the favor of the deities. They made offerings, chanted holy melodies, and invited the villagers to partake in the prayers. The entire realm was troubled, yet they chose to conceal the genuine purpose of the ceremonies, safeguarding the prince's honor. Every attempt to bring the prince back to his usual self appeared futile. The final resolution favored by the chief priest was that only genuine love could shatter the wicked enchantment placed upon the prince. Udara was a manifestation of affection, and only affection could shatter its enchantment. Yet, it was clear to all that the task at hand was utterly unfeasible. Naturally, who could possibly adore the prince in such a condition? It was terrifying to behold. The chief priest remarked that he would have to meet his end in this manner if he fails to discover true love. The royal family was heartbroken. The prince found himself trapped within the confines of a room, engulfed by waves of frustration and sorrow. He wept until there were no tears left to shed. As time passed, the months stretched on, and the king and queen grew ever more tyrannical. Even after adhering to the guidance of the other chief priests, there was no change. In their desperation, they chose to wait, clinging to the hope that a miracle might someday unfold. A secret room within the palace concealed the prince. Away from prying eyes, only the queen was permitted to enter that room. As she dedicated herself to the care of her son, the queen understood that if the villagers uncovered the prince's horrific change, the king's younger brother, Agu, would take advantage of the situation to assert his claim to the throne. Their reign hung by a thread in her absence. The grand palace, once alive with laughter and bustling activity, now stood in an unsettling silence. The hallways resonated with stillness, and the once vibrant ambience gave way to a heavy sense of melancholy. A heavy gloom enveloped the royal household, casting an air of mourning as if the king had already departed from this world. As the years passed, the villagers began to feel the weight of the prince's absence. Inquiries started to emerge. The prince had not been seen by anyone for quite some time. In recent yam festivals, the absence of the prince was palpable, and the villagers clearly felt his absence deeply. They longed to witness him parade through the village, radiating his charming smile and exuding a regal demeanor. As a group of maidens strolled towards the stream, their voices mingled in lively conversation. "The prince has been absent for an eternity," one of them remarked. "Do you believe he might still be alive?" "What sort of question is that?" Another woman silenced her. "How is it possible for you to utter such words? The prince remains alive." "What makes you certain?" Another cut in. Even with efforts to silence the chatter, whispers proliferated rapidly throughout the village. Whispers floated through the air, laden with speculation about the prince's destiny. The ambiguity and enigma only intensified their intrigue and apprehension. One evening, Agu made the choice to pay a visit to the king. Upon receiving the kola, the king began to speak. "What brings you here today, brother?" he inquired, his voice tinged with fatigue. Agu was the king's stepbrother, and he is the king's sole sibling. Agu replied, "Expressing concern for you and your throne. Your Majesty, I seek to uncover the fate of the prince." Whispers abound in the village, and it feels like an eternity since I last laid eyes on the prince. The monarch's gaze sharpened. "Have you arrived to ridicule me? Agu, I am aware of your true intentions, and it's clear that my well-being is not your priority. My son is doing well, and everyone will have the opportunity to see him when the moment is appropriate." Agu, perceiving the king's wrath, inclined his head slightly. "I intend no offense, my sovereign. My sole desire is for the prosperity and happiness of our family and our realm." The monarch chuckled heartily. "I see you, Agu, and when did the welfare of our family and kingdom start to hold such significance for you?" "As a mere infant at the time of our father's passing, I ascended to the throne. Yet he matured and decided to oppose me. Your desire for the throne is palpable, and while you may believe I'm unaware, my true concern lies in his intentions for it." He brushed aside Agu's concerns. Yet deep down, a weight of worry settled in his heart. The longer the prince stayed concealed, the more perilous the circumstances grew. The villagers' intrigue deepened, while Agu's aspirations began to surface more clearly. The queen, observing the burden weighing on her husband, endeavored to console him, yet she found herself equally distressed. Each morning, she would make her way to the prince's concealed chamber, bringing him sustenance and spending countless hours in his company. She spun tales of the outside world, striving to uplift his spirit. The prince absorbed the words, his heart heavy with a deep yearning for the life that had slipped away from him. He longed for the warmth of the sun on his skin, the joyful sounds of the villagers, and the exhilarating sense of freedom. On a serene night, the queen sat next to the prince, her eyes brimming with tears. "We shall discover a path, my son," she murmured. "I assure you, we will discover a path to set things straight." The prince nodded, yet within him stirred a profound sorrow. He understood that his mother was putting on a brave face for him, yet the sorrow in her eyes was unmistakable. He longed for the simplicity of normalcy, to stroll through the village and bask in the warmth of their affection and esteem. Agu, the king's brother, found himself unable to shake off the thoughts of his recent visit to the palace. The king's words, "Have you come to mock me?" reverberated in his mind. What is the significance of the king's statement? What could be the reason for his concealment of the prince? Agu observed that the king appeared gaunt and discontented. There was an undeniable sense of unease, and he felt compelled to uncover the truth behind it. One evening, Og observed the troubled look on her husband Agu's face and decided to approach him. "My dear," she said softly, "you seem to be burdened. What seems to be troubling you? Feel free to share whatever's on your mind." Agu let out a heavy sigh and turned his gaze toward his wife. After a brief pause, he chose to share his thoughts with her. "There seems to be a secret regarding the prince that the king is concealing. He might very well be gone." Og's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "If there's an issue with the prince, that means you ascend to the throne, correct?" "Indeed," Agu replied, his voice fading into silence. Og's eyes glimmered with determination. "We must proceed with utmost caution. It is essential to uncover the truth and reveal the king's secrets. This is the moment we've long anticipated. And now fate has paved the way for us. I long for the prince's demise and eagerly anticipate my ascension to the throne, where I will reside in the grand royal mansion." Agu pointed out that the king constructed it on his own. "He constructed it using your father's riches and resources. We are merely claiming what is rightfully ours," Og insisted. Agu paused, lost in contemplation. What steps should we take to proceed with this? At long last, he posed the question. "Believe me," Og said with an assured grin. "A plan is in place." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she began to unveil her scheme to her husband. Agu absorbed her words, his anticipation swelling with each sentence she uttered. A spy would be chosen to masquerade as a beggar, making their way to the palace to plead with the king for employment. The benevolent king decided to extend an opportunity to the beggar. The covert operative would seamlessly weave his way into the affections of the monarchs, revealing their hidden truths. Agu beamed, a wave of exhilaration and resolve washing over him. He was convinced that the king was concealing something, and now they had devised a strategy to reveal the truth. The following day, Og and Agu set their scheme into action. They searched for a man named Abina, recognized for his clever knack for adapting to any circumstance. They laid out their scheme before him, and he consented to assist in return for a vow of riches and influence. Once Agu ascended to the throne, Abina reinvented himself as a beggar, donning tattered garments and presenting a woeful visage. He approached the palace gates, earnestly imploring the guards for an audience with the king. "I am simply a man in need of employment. I implore you to grant me an audience with the king," he uttered, his voice quaking with a pretense of urgency. Moved by his plea, the guards escorted him to the king. In a display of his generous spirit, the king extended an offer to Abina for a position within the palace. Abina conveyed his appreciation and commenced his duties in the palace, gradually gaining the confidence of the king and queen. The wait had stretched on, and the prince's patience was wearing dangerously thin. He felt weary of remaining cloistered in his solitary space and yearned to embrace the vibrancy of the outside world once more. He longed for the days spent wandering through the forest and soaking in the stunning vistas from the mountains. One day, he pondered, "I can't remain in this place indefinitely." The prince resolved that the moment for action had arrived. Each morning, the queen would deliver food to him, and thereafter, he would not catch another glimpse of her until the following day. He understood that he could leverage this time for his benefit. The palace lay in silence, a heavy stillness enveloping him after 15 long years of confinement, a burden he could no longer endure. The prince started to slip away from the palace to relish the beauty of nature as he once did. Upon his initial entry into the forest, an intense sensation washed over him. He was bursting with enthusiasm. He longed for the outside world, yearning to explore every corner all at once. He made his way to the mountains, his beloved destination, and ascended to the summit. As he sat there, he gazed in awe at the stunning realm that unfolded before him. He longed to stroll through his village once more, to encounter all the lovely, familiar faces that brought him comfort. The forest appeared as it always did, brimming with vitality and splendor. As he lingered in contemplation, a melodic voice unexpectedly drifted through the trees, captivating his attention. He turned his head, searching for the origin of the enchanting melody, yet it appeared to emanate from both all around him and from an elusive void. The voice was unlike anything he had encountered, smooth as silk, yet strong enough to evoke profound feelings within him. Their enchanting tunes warmed his soul and filled his eyes with tears. He sat there, absorbed in the moment, allowing the captivating melodies to resonate within him. After he had thoroughly enjoyed the forest and its enchanting melodies, he made his way back to the palace, pondering who might be behind the creation of such a lovely song in the woods. That night, the voice lingered in his thoughts, and for the first time in years, he drifted into a deep, peaceful slumber. The following day, he ventured into the forest, driven not just by a desire to revel in nature, but also to encounter a mystical singing voice that echoed through the trees. That day promised to be truly unique. It was extraordinary, and he felt an irresistible pull to find the enchanting voice of the goddess hidden within the woods. Her voice ignited a spark within him, stirring a deep curiosity to discover her identity. With unwavering resolve, the prince rose to his feet and set off in pursuit of the captivating voice. He ventured further into the woods, his heart racing with excitement. The melody swelled, becoming increasingly enchanting as he pursued it. He navigated through the trees, traversed streams, and crossed meadows, ever attentive to the sound that lingered in his ears. As he strolled, his mind wandered to the vocalist. Who might hold such an enchanting voice? He envisioned her as a stunning deity of the woods. Perhaps, with every step, his curiosity and excitement blossomed. He had never experienced such an intense longing to connect with another person before. At last, he arrived at a clearing in the forest where the voice resonated most powerfully. He scanned the surroundings, yet found no one present. The melody lingered, enveloping the atmosphere in an ethereal charm. He remained motionless, attuned to the silence, before finally calling out, "Who are you? I would like to see you. Please." In that brief instant, everything fell quiet. Yumina heard the voice and felt a chill run down her spine. For years, she had not encountered another soul in this forest, save for her mother, who was unwell and no longer visited as often as she once did. Moreover, she had no desire to be noticed. She concealed herself behind the trees. "Please reveal yourself if you are indeed human." Her voice trembled as she responded. "It's better if you don't see me. I look so ugly and frightening. I am a person, yet I appear distinct." The prince chuckled heartily. "I don't appear any better either. Honestly, I doubt you could possibly look worse than I do. I still wish to see you." A blend of trepidation and intrigue compelled her to glance over. Her heart raced. The voice was unmistakably human. Yet the being standing in front of her resembled an ape. Chills coursed through her body, and dread gripped her entirely. Was he about to inflict harm upon her? What actions would he take upon discovering her presence? Her thoughts spiraled in a whirlwind of anxiety until his voice reached her once more. The prince spoke softly, assuring, "I won't cause you any harm. Your songs resonate with me deeply, and I would cherish the opportunity to meet you and share some moments together. I assure you, I mean no harm." She paused, yet his words resonated with sincerity and warmth. Could he be an extraordinary presence? She pondered, choosing to place her faith in him. She cautiously emerged from her hiding spot among the trees, her heart racing. The prince was escorting her home when he caught sight of her. She was everything he had never envisioned. Her voice was incredibly powerful and beautiful, yet her appearance was frail, diminutive, and unappealing. It was difficult to fathom that such a magnificent voice could emanate from this peculiar figure. He pondered whether she was truly human at all. Yumina and the prince found themselves seated beneath the tree, a few feet separating them, each enveloped in a mix of nervousness and curiosity. Initially, silence enveloped them, their eyes exchanging unspoken words as they locked gazes. They were both attempting to grasp the essence of one another, pondering the reasons behind their peculiar appearances. Eventually, the prince's voice broke the silence, gentle and low. "I understand your curiosity about me, but I am just a person. For many years, I've been in the shadows. I appear this way due to a curse placed upon me by the malevolent spirits of the forest for indulging in their cherished fruits. The confinement of the room had become unbearable. I relish my escapades in the forest and have chosen to visit it once more. Yet, in that moment, your voice reached me. It stirred emotions within me that I haven't experienced in ages. I simply wish for us to be friends." Yumina absorbed the words, her apprehension gradually dissipating. "I carry the weight of a curse tied to my mother's actions during her pregnancy with me. I felt out of place and struggled to endure the hurt and ridicule from the townsfolk. At one point, I found myself in a life-threatening situation, prompting my mother to take the drastic step of hiding me away in the forest. I've been residing here for quite a while," she responded. "Expressing myself through song brings me joy and a sense of liberation." They remained seated in quietude for a time, each absorbed in their individual reflections. The woods enveloped them in a hushed silence, as if attuned to the thoughts that lingered between them. At last, the prince turned to Yumina and remarked, "I might appear changed, but deep down, I remain just a person. I seek a companion to converse with and exchange the stories of my days." Yumina felt a gentle warmth in her heart. She noticed the sorrow reflected in his gaze, and a profound sense of compassion welled up within her. "I will be your friend," she said softly. "We can gather and converse, and I will perform for you whenever you desire. I reside not too far from this location." A grin blossomed on the prince's face. "Thank you," he expressed, his tone brimming with appreciation. From that moment forward, Yumina and the prince convened frequently in the woods. They shared stories of their lives, aspirations, and anxieties. Yumina sang her enchanting melodies, and the prince listened, experiencing a warmth in his heart that had long been absent. As time passed, Their bond deepened. Eumena discovered the importance of looking past the prince's exterior, recognizing the kind and gentle soul that lay within. The prince, in return, treasured Eumena's presence and the happiness her melodies infused into his life. He could perceive that hidden beneath this unsightly exterior were the most exquisite souls he had ever encountered. Their gatherings turned into the most anticipated moments of their days. Eumena would sing while the prince recounted tales from his life prior to the journey. They shared laughter, shed tears, and discovered solace in one another's company. The forest, previously shrouded in solitude and dread, transformed into a sanctuary of camaraderie and optimism for Eumena and the prince. In one another, they discovered a bond that went beyond mere appearances, a connection that illuminated their lives. In the meantime, the cunning Abena was diligently working to capture the king's affection. Abena possessed remarkable talent as a flute player. Whenever he observed the king's sorrow, he would visit the palace and serenade him with his flute. The gentle, melodic strains of music consistently reached the king's heart, providing him with a sense of tranquility. Abena consistently endeavored to bring joy to the king. At times, he would share amusing anecdotes that brought laughter to the king. At times, he would share captivating tales with the king or provide him with uplifting words. Abena's kindness was boundless, and the king found himself deeply enamored with him. The king struggled to complete his thought without bringing up Abena. I have such deep affection for that young man. He brings me so much joy, and I hope he becomes my son, the king someday. Yet, the queen found herself in a state of discontent. I have no fondness for that young man, she remarked. He is good and all, but I notice how his eyes wander everywhere. Do you believe he has a purpose for being here? We have no prior acquaintance with him, and out of nowhere, he appears, exuding kindness and perfection. The monarch chuckled heartily. Darling, it seems like you might be feeling a bit overwhelmed and anxious. I will reach out to Abena to play his enchanting flute, bringing you some comfort. Abena is a blessing in our lives, and perhaps you overthink things. The king brushed aside the queen's worries, allowing Abena to persist in his nefarious tasks within the palace. He excelled in that area. Abena's strategy involved drawing near to the king with utmost precision. With his captivating charm and exceptional musical abilities, he endeared himself to the king, earning his trust. Each day, he discovered fresh methods to delight the king. He gathered blooms from the garden, crafted delightful dishes, and even assisted the king with his everyday duties. The more Abena accomplished, the more the king admired him. The queen, nonetheless, kept a wary eye on Abena. She observed him intently, picking up on the subtle details that felt amiss. His enthusiasm to satisfy, his unwavering presence, and the way he appeared to instinctively understand the right words and actions. She was unable to dismiss the nagging sensation that Abena held deeper secrets. Yet she felt powerless to impose her instincts upon her husband. He held a deep affection and unwavering trust for Abena, and she could only hope that his faith was well placed. One evening, the monarch faced a day filled with challenges. He felt a deep concern for the realm and the enigmatic disappearance of his son. Abena observed the king's turmoil and swiftly retrieved his flute. A gentle, soothing melody flowed through the space, enveloping it in tranquility. The monarch shut his eyes, allowing the melodies to envelop him, as he sensed all his concerns dissolve into nothingness. Following the performance, Abena took a seat beside the king and remarked, "Your Majesty, you are a remarkable ruler, beloved by your people, and you have accomplished so much for the kingdom. At times, even the most accomplished must pause and have faith that all will turn out well." The monarch beamed and gently stroked Abena's neck. "Thank you, Abena. Your words and melodies consistently provide me with great solace. Your presence is truly invaluable to me." "Indeed, Your Majesty." Abena's voice remained soft and soothing. "Before his passing, my father would often remind me that even the mightiest among us occasionally seek solace. Feel free to share whatever's on your mind whenever you wish. I will stand by your side to offer my support." The monarch remained quiet, with tears streaming down his face. "I have poured my heart and soul into constructing this realm, and the thought of losing it is unbearable." He spoke, his voice laden with feeling. Abena feigned confusion. "What could possibly lead to the downfall of your realm?" he inquired, before an answer could be given. The king suddenly rose and hurried into his private chamber, leaving Abena in solitude. In the heart of the forest, Rincharalu and Eumena nurtured their bond, weaving tales of camaraderie amidst the trees. Eumena twirled and sang among the trees, her voice weaving enchanting melodies that floated through the air. As Ralu sat close by, savoring the sweet sounds of her performance, The melodies enveloped him in tranquility, easing his burdens and worries. When Yumina wasn't singing, Ralu would lead her up the mountains, where they would sit side by side, gazing at the village below. Yumina was filled with excitement. Having not set eyes on her village for 15 years, the view ignited a thrill within her that words could hardly capture. On the mountain, they exchanged tales of their journeys and experiences. Ralu was overwhelmed with sadness upon learning about the bullying Yumina endured from the village children. Even as their bond deepened, Ralu chose to conceal his royal identity from Yumina, worried that revealing it could alter the nature of their friendship. One evening, the king reclined in his palace, burdened by fatigue, and summoned Abina to enchant him with his flute. Abina, filled with enthusiasm, entered without delay and started to entertain and commend the king. On that day, he delivered an outstanding performance that elevated the king's spirits. Once he completed his task, the king invited Abina to take a seat beside him. The king then revealed his most profound secrets, known only to himself, the queen, and the chief priest. Abina was taken aback by the words that reached his ears. Emotions cascaded down his face as he grasped the king's hand. "I deeply regret to learn of this, Your Majesty. This may feel overwhelming, but hold on tight. I hope for a miracle to occur." The monarch offered a faint smile. He expressed his concern, stating that despite our best efforts, nothing has yielded results. In the stillness of the moment, the king's mind raced with concerns for his realm, while Abina grappled with the weight of newfound knowledge. That night, shrouded in shadows, Abina quietly made his way to the palace to rendezvous with Agu, the king's sibling. He conveyed all the information he had gathered. Agu was utterly amazed. "Are you saying the prince now resembles an ape?" he inquired, a grin spreading across his face. He chuckled with enthusiasm. "This is fantastic news. For this excellent work, I will compensate you further," Abina observed, caught in a whirlwind of exhilaration and remorse. "When I ascend to the throne," Agu declared, "I shall appoint you as my chief advisor. Your wisdom and perfection are truly remarkable." The plan unfolded flawlessly, yet witnessing the king's anguish, all sealed away, had ignited something deep within Abina. He set those emotions aside, concentrating on the prize ahead. Agu presented him with a pouch of gold coins and outlined their forthcoming actions. As time went on, Abina kept enchanting the king and collecting valuable insights, while Ralu and Yumina's connection deepened amidst the trees. Ralu treasured every moment spent with Yumina, finding comfort in her company and the melodies she shared. Yumina discovered happiness and connection with Ralu, even as the mystery of his true identity remained unsolved. The king had developed a deep affection for Abina, and one day, amidst their regular conversations, he gazed at Abina with warmth and said, "I wish you were my son, or that there was a way I could adopt you. My affection for you knows no bounds. Your wisdom is truly remarkable, and I deeply appreciate all the assistance you've provided. You are no longer bound to serve in this palace from this moment forward." Tears filled Abina's eyes as the turmoil within his mind intensified. An ingenious yet avaricious notion came to him. Should the king choose to adopt him, he might ascend to the throne as the next ruler. He was destined to possess greater wealth than Agu had ever envisioned for him. His eyes sparkled with determination, and as he recognized the chance ahead of him, he required a strategy. After toiling diligently to earn the king's confidence, the moment for a generous reward had finally arrived. That night, Abina found himself unable to drift into slumber. He lay awake, envisioning his future as a ruler and the vast riches that would soon be his. A concept started to take shape in his thoughts. He would turn against Agu and disclose his secrets to the king. This would remove Agu as a danger, leading the king to exile him from the village. Abina chuckled softly, satisfied with his clever scheme. He proclaimed his intelligence with confidence. Unbeknownst to Abina, Agu had quietly maneuvered to solidify his own authority. Initially, he convened with the village elders and disclosed the prince's secrets to them. He offered him a wealth of coins and assured him of even greater rewards should they lend their support to his bid for the throne. "The time has come for me to ascend to the throne," Agu declared that the current king has no heir. "On the day of the New Yam festival, the entire village will uncover the truth, and the king will feel a deep sense of shame. Upon my ascension to the throne, I shall construct for you all contemporary dwellings and bestow upon you extensive territories. I simply seek your backing." Agu possessed a knack for manipulation and persuasion. "How is it possible for the king to conceal the truth about his son from you?" "The elders?" he inquired. "He has deceived all, displaying a complete lack of consideration for you." "The elders," influenced by Agu's persuasive speech and incentives, consented to back him. They persistently inquired whether he was being honest regarding the prince, and Agu confidently affirmed that he was. The upcoming Yam festival loomed just days ahead, and Agu had decided that this would be the moment to humiliate the king and usurp his throne if the prince was not presented. He harbored doubts about Abina and sensed the possibility of betrayal lurking beneath the surface. From the very start, he had positioned a spy to keep a close watch on Abina's movements within the palace. Amaka was a girl, a stunning palace maiden who had captured Abina's attention. Abina had even vowed to wed her once he amassed enough wealth and departed from the palace. That evening, Abina, filled with excitement about his forthcoming triumph, indulged in plenty of palm wine and made his way directly to Amaka's chamber. She greeted him with open arms and suggested he have another drink. As Abina succumbed to intoxication, he allowed his nefarious scheme to drift into slumber. Agu believes he's clever, he chuckled. But I possess greater wit. The king holds me in such high regard now, viewing me as his own son. I will remove Agu from the equation and ascend to the throne. Then you shall reign as my queen. Amaka smiled as she poured him more wine. Yet within her, a calculation was taking place. The following day, she conveyed all the details to Agu. Fuming yet resolute, Agu understood that he had to move swiftly to eliminate the threat posed by Abina. He couldn't allow his carefully crafted plan to fall apart. Agu expressed his gratitude to Amaka with great enthusiasm. He had vowed to take her as his second wife once he claimed the throne. He started devising his next strategy. He planned to turn Abina's betrayal into an opportunity for himself. He had to take him out before he could sabotage everything he had meticulously arranged. And time was of the essence. In the meantime, Abina persisted in relishing the king's favor. The king bestowed upon him gifts and privileges, regarding him almost as if he were his own son. Abina was filled with a sense of invincibility, oblivious to the tempest gathering in the shadows. With the new Yam festival looming just 2 days ahead, excitement buzzed through the village. As it was always a grand occasion, numerous masquerades of various sorts filled the air, accompanied by an abundance of music, dancing, and merriment. The villagers adorned themselves in exquisite garments, and the palace was perpetually alive with activity. The event was truly remarkable, uplifting the spirits of all who attended. Agu was unable to contain his smile. He was filled with anticipation at the thought of witnessing the king's downfall and public humiliation. He had summoned Abina and sat before his heart, patiently awaiting his arrival. Upon Abina's arrival, Agu revealed that he had stumbled upon gold in a section of the forest and required their assistance to locate a suitable hiding spot. He suggested to Abina that selling it could yield a substantial profit. He understood that Abina's greed made this an excellent lure to ensnare him. Abina felt a surge of excitement within him. He contemplated that by eliminating Agu, all the gold would be his alone. He would reign as the wealthiest monarch to have ever existed. Upon arriving at the forest, Agu pointed out a particular spot and requested that he begin digging there. As Abina starts to dig, Agu draws a machete and swiftly severs Abina's head. He excavated the earth and interred him within. He had one final task to complete. Keeping Prince Raleigh alive served no purpose. Abina had mentioned that he often slipped away to the forest each day. He planned to enlist a hunter to track him down, eliminate him, and then deliver his lifeless body to him. Agu was fiercely ambitious and craved power intensely. He required no obstacles on his path to ascend the throne. The moment the king lays eyes on the lifeless form of his grotesque offspring will undoubtedly be the pinnacle of the occasion. He longed to witness him weep like a child. His plans unfolded seamlessly. He hired a skilled hunter from a neighboring town and compensated him generously. That evening, the prince made his way to the forest as he often did, eager to reunite with his dear friend Yumina when the sharp sound of gunshots pierced the air. It struck him hard in the abdomen, and then 2 more shots rang out, sending him crashing to the ground. He sprawled motionless on the ground. Yumina heard the initial crack of the gunshot and dashed outside. She concealed herself behind the tree and observed. She nearly let out a scream upon seeing Raleigh collapsed on the ground. She lingered in silence, and when the sounds and footsteps faded away, she dashed out and embraced Raleigh. Her tears fell, resonating through the woods. "I beg you, stay with me," she pleaded, clinging to him and yearning for his return to life. Her heart broke into fragments. It felt as though her essence was drifting away. Her love for him had deepened profoundly, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. With tears streaming down her face, she shut her eyes and let her voice soar in song. She sang, her voice trembling. The woods trembled as anguish reverberated within her. She expressed her deepest emotions through her melodies. Out of nowhere, a brilliant light pierced through the forest, causing the leaves to tremble and dance. The prince's warmth enveloped her, initiating a swift healing process. And then a gentle touch brought her back to the realm of awareness. As she blinked awake, her heart raced at the sight of a strikingly handsome man seated in front of her. A warm smile gracing his lips. She scanned her surroundings, seeking the prince, only to find him seated precisely at the spot near Raleigh. Where could he be? She inquired. Then the youth began to speak. It was indeed Raleigh. She had listened to his voice. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she gazed at him. Disbelief etched across her face. She pondered the fate that had befallen him. Yumina was unaware that her voice possessed a remarkable ability to heal. Her melodies had the power to heal any ailment and bring the departed back to life. She looked for the bullet wound, but it had vanished completely. As she released her emotions in a cascade of tears, it resonated with an unmistakable signal. Her heart belonged to the prince, and it was only love that held the power to shatter the wicked enchantment. Prince Raleigh was completely liberated. Yumina felt a sense of relief that Raleigh was finally free. Yet a wave of melancholy swept through her. He planned to part ways with her and return to the routine he once knew. In that moment, she would meet her end, solitary amidst the trees. Aside from her mother, who would visit from time to time, she found herself in solitude. The prince, attuned to her innermost musings, gathered her into his embrace. "Do you really believe I would walk away from you?" "Absolutely not. You brought me back to life when I felt like I was fading away. Believe me, I understand your perspective. The beauty of your heart is unparalleled. Your actions have profoundly impacted my existence. I may be uncertain, but one thing is clear, you are an invaluable treasure, and life without you feels impossible." He took her hands gently and said, "I'm not sure how this will come across, but I've fallen in love with you." Yumina's eyes grew wide with astonishment. "Do you have feelings for me?" He softly extricated himself from her embrace, lifting her chin to meet her gaze. Before him stood the most exquisite maiden he had ever laid eyes on in his entire existence. They stood in awe, their expressions a blend of shock and wonder as they gazed at themselves. Captivated by these extraordinary miracles, Yumina appeared effortlessly beautiful and completely ordinary. They were unable to contain their exhilaration, bursting into joyful screams, with tears streaming down their faces. Yumina twirled and leaped among the trees, her joy radiating as Prince Ralu observed her, a broad smile lighting up his face. That moment meant the world to them both. Out of nowhere, footsteps echoed in the silence. Initially, Yumina believed it was her mother approaching, but soon they spotted a hunter wielding a gun, advancing in their direction. Swiftly, they concealed themselves behind a towering tree, observing with careful vigilance. A hunter employed by Ago was present. His mission was to eliminate the prince and return with the lifeless form. Yet after taking the shot, he abandoned the body in the woods and escaped. Ago was seething with rage. "What proof should I present to the villagers? How can they trust me? Are you attempting to sabotage my plans? I promise you, if that body isn't found before the festival, I will take matters into my own hands. You are aware of my abilities." The hunter was filled with dread by Ago's merciless threats. He hurriedly retreated into the forest, filled with dread at the thought of what Ago might unleash upon him. He had no choice: discover the body or meet his inevitable end. The hunter made his way back to the place he believed he had struck the prince, his heart racing as he searched with urgency. He scanned the bushes and peered beneath the trees. Yet there was no sign of a body. He was consumed by fear. What transpired? Did a creature arrive and consume him swiftly? "I'm done," he declared, his hands gripping his head. He sank to the earth, his cries echoing with a profound sense of hopelessness. Out of nowhere, the prince drew near to him. "Young man," he exclaimed. The hunter, taken aback, glanced upward to find the prince grasping his firearm. In a moment of sheer panic, the hunter let his gun slip from his grasp, and the prince swiftly retrieved it from the ground. The prince observed the trepidation reflected in the hunter's gaze. He was the very man who had pulled the trigger on him. "Please, show me mercy," the hunter implored the prince. "And why should I do that?" the prince inquired, "noting that you nearly took my life." The hunter observed the unfamiliar figure. Curiosity piqued as he pondered the identity of this enigmatic stranger. The prince beamed with delight. "I'm Ralu, the son of King Dyke," he whispered, careful to keep his voice low so Yumina wouldn't overhear. He aimed to astonish her. The hunter stood frozen, his jaw slack in disbelief. "Reveal the identity of the one who ordered your assassination, and I shall grant you mercy." The hunter revealed all the details regarding Agu and his sinister scheme. The prince declared to the hunter, "You owe me your life now. A fresh strategy has come to mind." In the village, Agu felt a sense of unease. The darkness enveloped the land. And still, the hunter was absent. His wife presented him with dinner, yet he declined to partake. She noticed the turmoil within him. "My king," she called out with a hesitant voice to her husband. "Kindly enjoy your meal. Our clothes are prepared for tomorrow. And I refuse to back down. I have faith that you will ascend to the throne, and our son will follow in your footsteps. The prince has perished, and should his body remain undiscovered, it will solidify the whispers that he met his end ages ago." Agu cast a glance at his wife, a smile spreading across his face. "Do you understand now why I chose to spend my life with you? Your beauty is matched only by your intelligence. You shall reign as my queen when I ascend to the throne. Join me for a meal." His sorrow swiftly transformed into joy as he recognized an opportunity to leverage the situation to his benefit. They were both brimming with excitement for the event that awaited him the next day. At the same time, Prince Rala and the hunter were setting their schemes in motion. The following morning, the village buzzed with anticipation for the New Year festival. The palace was alive with bustling preparations. Agu, assured of the prince's demise, prepared to execute his plan. He schemed to humiliate the king in front of all and seize the crown for his own ambition. During the festival, the villagers assembled in their most elegant attire. The atmosphere was alive with melodies and the enticing aroma of delectable dishes. Agu bided his time, anticipating the ideal moment to unveil his assertion. The elders rallied behind him, swayed by his alluring promise of riches and authority. As the celebrations reached their zenith, Agu rose and summoned everyone's focus. "My dear villagers," he commenced, "I have an exciting announcement to share." At that moment, the hunter concealed among the onlookers emerged. Pretending to be thrilled, "Agu," he exclaimed, "I have discovered the prince's body. Feel free to proceed with your initial plan. The king will be utterly astonished." Agu's eyes sparkled with anticipation, sensing that fortune had finally smiled upon him. He cleared his throat and spoke to the audience. "For 15 long years, my people, we have awaited the return of our prince. According to the laws of our land, the king must be present after 30 years of his reign. Indeed, we are acquainted with the prince. But the question remains, where is he? This year signifies the 30th year of the king's reign, and for the last 15 years, he has shrouded us in mystery concerning the princes we are discussing. It is essential for us to feel confident that our realm is being well managed and that its future is secure. Should the prince still draw breath, we implore the king to reveal this truth at once. If he is indeed alive, let him reveal himself as the prince. If he cannot, then I, Agu, will demonstrate what our true prince looks like and prove that this man we refer to as king is unworthy of our trust." He simply thinks of himself. The king was seized by terror, his heart racing with such intensity that it seemed poised to burst from his chest. This was poised to be the most humiliating moment he had ever encountered. Compounding the situation, the prince had vanished. That morning, they realized he was missing but chose to remain silent until the ceremony concluded. Is it possible that Agu has taken the prince captive? The idea sent a shiver down his spine. The queen was filled with dread, her complexion ashen with terror, witnessing the trepidation reflected in the king's gaze. Agu experienced a thrilling rush of exhilaration. This exceeded all his expectations. He could only envision the turmoil that would erupt when the corpse of the monster prince was unveiled to the masses. Following a brief silence, Agu resumed speaking. "You have witnessed it, my friends. Given that the king is keeping the prince's matters to himself, there's no need to stress. Allow me to introduce the esteemed prince of our realm, Prince Ralu." All eyes turned upward with a sense of eager expectation, longing to catch a glimpse of the prince. The king rose abruptly, tears cascading down his cheeks. The regal sentinels, aligned with precision, proceeded from the palace with an air of authority. Agu observed with a furrowed brow, perplexed by the unfolding events. He had anticipated that the hunter would merely present the prince's lifeless form. This hunter possesses a certain charm, often finding humor in his own thoughts. A sudden, resounding shout pierced the air. "Hail to the prince! Hail to the prince! Hail to the prince!" Before the assembled throng, atop a gleaming white steed, sat Prince Ralu, exuding charm and brilliance. The monarchs immediately identified their offspring and erupted in joyous exclamations. awestruck by the wonder unfolding before their eyes. Agu's expression was one of utter astonishment and incredulity. The hunter had turned against him. And maybe Abina had as well. He attempted to escape, yet the villagers restrained him. The crowd erupted in jubilant cheers upon the long-awaited return of their cherished prince. And the sound of their elation lingered in the air for what felt like an eternity. As the fervor gradually subsided, Prince Ralu rose to speak to the gathered crowd. "My beloved villagers," he commenced, his voice resonant and unwavering. "I understand you might be curious about why I've been away. For years I was trapped and concealed. But thanks to you, I am vibrant and well once more." The audience absorbed every word. Captivated and fully engaged, Ralu pressed on, declaring that Agu has deceived us all. He aimed to seize the crown through cunning and betrayal. He employed a hunter to take my life. Yet destiny had different intentions. The individual before you embodies not the path you must take, but rather a vessel of confidence and guidance. The audience whispered in unison, their trust in their ruler and sovereign renewed. Agu sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he pleaded for forgiveness. Yet the king's wrath was unyielding. He commanded that Agu be removed and exiled from the village for all time. The ink flowed on, and in my moments of anguish and isolation, I discovered my kindred spirit. Her influence is the foundation of my presence here today. Our tales were steeped in sorrow, as we both endured the burdens placed upon us by the deities. Yet, the bond we share shattered the enchantments that weighed heavily upon us. She is not just a treasure for me, but will be a treasure for everyone. Dear mother, father, and cherished ones, I stand before you today to introduce my future wife, the daughter of Inkikina, who faced punishment and was cast away to the desolate outskirts of the village. Ridiculed by all, until her mother took refuge in the forest to shield her from the scorn. In her, I discovered joy. She is none other than Yumina. Without hesitation, Yumina stepped out. The villagers were utterly astonished. Her beauty was captivating. Her beauty was unlike anything they had encountered before. They all gazed in astonishment as the prince lifted her effortlessly into his embrace. Uma Deramu Lorgrimus. Unbeknownst to her, the man she had shared her time with in the forest was none other than the prince of her village. What a remarkable shift, she mused. From the woods to the grand palace. It felt as though she were lost in a dream. She had never envisioned that this day would arrive. The prince softly murmured comforting words into her ears. The villagers held her memory close, often reflecting on the mysterious way she vanished without a trace. Today, she seems to embody the essence of a prince's bride. Life has a unique manner of imparting lessons and guiding us toward the knowledge we require. They felt a deep sense of remorse for the way they had treated Inkikina, realizing too late that they had left her alone when she needed them the most. Indeed, they murmured among themselves, "No child is a waste." Suddenly, a cry of happiness erupted. A new dawn broke over the land, promising the villagers a return to their joyful kingdom once more. Inkikina was overwhelmed with happiness upon hearing the wonderful news, and the king promptly commanded her return to the village, gifting her a splendid house to reside in as a reward. He felt a sense of relief that she had escaped a grim fate long ago. Otherwise, his son would have perished as a beast, and he would have forfeited his crown to his wicked sibling. He pondered the countless lives this tradition might have nurtured, and the many remarkable destinies that could have been forfeited due to this malevolent practice. He needed to put a stop to this wicked tradition without delay. Weeks later, Inkoma and Prince Ralu exchanged vows in an extravagant ceremony. The entire village experienced a remarkable moment. This was truly a celebration of genuine love, leading them all to a life of happiness thereafter. Hey friends, I appreciate you tuning into this incredible tale. I understand it's quite lengthy, but I observed that you all aren't fond of the Part 1. Part 2 series approach. Therefore, I opted to consolidate everything into a single video, which required a significant amount of time from me. I hope you find as much pleasure in watching it as I found in creating it. If you're tuning into this channel and have been enjoying the tales I've shared, I invite you to click the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay updated on our latest stories. I truly appreciate your support and the wonderful comments you've shared. They mean the world to me, providing endless hope, encouragement, and unwavering support. I really appreciate it. Thank you all very much. For now, I must take my leave and look forward to our next tale together. Farewell.